our engines are built up as far as I can take it, less literally a couple of parts. So what we've got is we've got the engine cradle, which is what is used to mount the engine onto the wings, and that needs to be painted in a wood colour. So same process as we've done with the cockpit, we'll prime it white, put a light wood colour down of some type, and then go in and put some wood effect on it as best we can. The engine is built up. It's mainly black and aluminium. There are some brass and copper details to put on, but in the main it's semi-gloss black. So that will be easy to spray paint up. And then we've got some pipe work to go on, which is copper. And then I've taken 4 of these off, but actually I'm only going to use 2. Now in step 3 it says, let me just see the wording so we get it right. Do not attach port magneto yet. But actually in step 6, the port magneto is a slightly different part. So that's clearly just particular to this Gotha and not on the ordinary ones. So 2 of these parts are becoming spares effectively. So they need to be painted separately. They go on either side of this here, and that is aluminium, so it just becomes a bit more difficult to paint it if the magneto's in, and the magneto's got some detailed painting to do as well. So once we've painted that aluminium, we can glue in the magneto and paint that up separately. And once this is all painted, we can probably, the last thing we'll do is paint that copper and then attach it in. I'm not going to do any wiring. I know people will ask. I think there should be a wire that goes from this rod here into that hole, but to be honest, I want to concentrate on the rigging, and this will be mainly closed up to this sort of height, so you won't see that. So yeah, that is the engine part done. What I'm going to do now is carry on with construction of other parts of the aircraft so that I am at sub-assemblies. Now in step 6, the first thing we're going to do is mount it onto the wing. So it mounts really nicely. I have test fitted it. You can see it just falls into place there. So that's going to look cool, and then we put the cowling around it. But yeah, that is step 5 done. So we're on to step 6 next. Right, time to paint our engines. So we've given them, we've just airbrushed them in Humbrol 33, which I think most people will know is flat black, and that gives us a good basis for what we want to do. Now these have been left about 24 hours, and we're using the Humbrol 33 effectively as a primer, but it also means we can use it for the black elements as well. So the black is my base colour, if you like, and we can simply, when we've finished, give all this a satin clear coat, and that will bring that black to life. So at the moment it's looking quite dull and dirty, but we're going to bring it to life with all the colours. Now I think we're probably going to start with aluminium, which is my next most common colour on here. Quite a bit of detail painting, so several different thicknesses of brushes will be used as we go through this, but basically everything below the pistons is largely aluminium, and then we've got some copper and some brass to pick out. And on the top there, we've got some little square plates along here on top of the rocker covers, and it doesn't actually, on the instructions, call out a colour for them. I've just been having a look, and it really doesn't say. So I'm going to assume, as they're depicting them sort of as an aluminium colour. I'm going to assume there's some form of little steel plate. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll pick them out in a different silver-like colour so that they have a contrast to everything else we're doing. So let's start with the sump, shall we, and the engine block. Okay, that completes the aluminium on the engine. So I'll get the other one done, and then I think the next thing we're probably going to do is brass. So our engine blocks are painted up. We have got all the main colours down. So we started, as you saw, with a matte black for everything, and then we've painted in the aluminium, the brass and the copper, and then finally on the top there's some plates that are shown in the instructions as silver plates, and you can clearly see that, but there is no reference to what colour they should be at all in any of the instructions as far as I can see. So I decided to just go with a steel colour. Actually just used silver, just to give it a bit of a contrast from the aluminium. It's a bit brighter. So before we do any weathering and attach the copper pipes that need to go in, we've got some decals to put on. So there's a number of decals to go on. I think there's 4 or 5 to go on the whole thing. So 10 decals in total across the 2. So that's the next job, is to get the decals on. So the Magnetos, we're only putting one on in that format because the other one is attached to these rods here. But clearly on the instructions you can see that they are brown, which I'm guessing is Bakelite or something like that, I guess. So you've got black, then you've got a brown bit on top, then you've got brass, and I'm gonna guess that is silver, like that, rather than white. Though not clear because the instructions aren't telling you. They're telling you that's brass. But other than that, it just says D, which is black. But there's clearly brown on there and white or silver. So I'm going to go with silver. And I'm going to go with brown. I'm just going to go flat brown on the top, which I think will be a good match for the colour. But you know, it's not called out. It's not listed in the paint list. So yeah, another bit that's just missing from the instructions, but we can do it. So my dynamos are now painted up with the brass and the silver. They look pretty cool. Nice little detail for the side of the engine. So all we've got left to do is to paint these legs in the very pale grey colour that's used for the wing supports and what have you. Paint up the engine cradles, and then that's the engine part done. Next step is just to put some wash down on the black parts. So we've done now the aluminium and we've put some highlights in and just a little bit of streaking here and there just to give it a little bit of a used effect without sort of going over the top. So we need to do something on the black. So I'm going to use this panel line wash stone graper black. It's a MIG product. I've used it a few times before. You have to use it very sparingly, but it does work okay. I've chosen to go with new wood for the engine mounts. They're basically wooden frames anyway. We will try and put some wood grain on, but actually I suspect very little of this ends up being seen once it's in the engine's installed and it's all got its covers on. But what we'll do is we'll paint it in the base new wood colour to start with, and then we'll perhaps do a test assembly and see whether we can just leave it like that or whether we need to do some form of graining. There's no point putting a lot of effort into it if it's effectively not going to get seen anyway. So that completes our engines now. Having placed the engines in their cradle and had a quick look at the cowlings that go round, I've decided that just leaving the wood, natural wood, without any wood graining will be perfectly fine. And actually that brightness of that wood just helps illuminate the parts and lets them stand out a little bit when you're looking. So just to recap, we painted everything initially in a black matte enamel, which acted as an undercoat but also became the main colour for the top part of the engines. Then we've picked out in our aluminium, which was a MIG aluminium, which has come up really well with a nice sort of matte effect that you might expect from a cast engine block. Then we've picked out in again a MIG brass, and then we have used MIG copper on a couple of places, and then these top plates here have been picked out with Vallejo silver RLM 001, and that is the same silver that we have then used on the Magnetos there. And then it has some decals on it, so you can see we've got decals on the end there and both sides of the engine block. So it comes up really well. And then if you want to take it a little bit further, I used the Tamiya black panel liner on the aluminium areas, and the stone grey for black panel line wash from MIG on the black, which has just given it a little bit more of a used, worn look. And then we have mounted them in our cradles. They're not glued in yet, and we can see how they're going to look on the engine, on the wings there. So you can have the cowls fully built up, or leave the top part open so you can see some of the engine, which I think will be nice to do on one of them. Now, these aren't finished just yet. We have the Magnetos put on. The paint is still drying, the white grey paint is still drying, but that'll go, basically it will attach around about there on the engine, and then these will stick up and will connect into the fuselage, I suspect. I'll know for sure when we come to test fit it all. So we're not going to glue anything in at this stage because we've got the wings to paint, but But yeah, that is the engines done as far as I can take them for now. And effectively, that completes step 5, building up the engines and the engine blocks. So when we turn the page, we can see those being installed, but I need to paint the wings first. We've got the radiators that we can look at doing next. Now, they're calling this out as C, which again is aluminium, but I'm going to actually do them in the silver so they're a little bit brighter and don't look cast and more like a polished metal is my plan. So I think that'll look quite good, and then we can give them a black wash to emulate the radiator there. We also have the exhaust to do, and it says steel and rust, but doesn't really tell you where. But when you look at the picture, it looks quite shiny to me, so I suspect these little ends here are the actual exhaust. That's going to connect to the manifold, so that's the rusty element, and I think this is like a cover, stop you getting burnt on the exhaust or something like that, and I think that's steel. So we'll be painting that steel, painting just those bits rust, and then maybe doing some heat staining and some exhaust fume staining on the back end there. So that's my thought process on that. So let's have a look next at the radiators and getting them built up as a sub-assembly. Okay, I have primed these radiators and exhausts. Oh, nearly primed by the looks of it. Anyway, I've primed them in a gloss black because these are called out actually as aluminium, all of these. But I'm not going to use aluminium, I'm going to use silver, because what I want to do is a little bit of, on these particularly, a little bit of heat weathering, and on these I want them to have a bit more of a shine than aluminium, which would be a little bit duller. So I want them to have a little bit of shine so that we get a nice contrast with the grill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint these up in the silver, and then we can do a little bit of weathering, and not too much on here. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. I'll probably give the whole thing a wash and then maybe dry brush it and highlight the edges a little bit and do it that way. Whereas with this, we're going to want to put a little bit of heat witness on here and then a little bit of smokiness, and we've got some rust to paint in. So without further ado, I'm going to do that. The next step in doing our laminated propeller. So this is step 3. This isn't the propeller you saw used in step 2, but the process to achieve this effect was exactly the same. A base colour and then oil brushes that are sponged off, and you can see that gives you quite a nice wood grain effect. Now in this particular example, we've used 2 different oil brusher colours and mixed them together, which is why you can see there's 2 different slightly a sort of a brown and a reddy brown in the mix, and it just gives you a slightly different effect. Well, what we want to do now is put the laminations on of a darker wood. So to achieve that, there's different methods that people approach, but I'm going to show you how I prefer to do it, which I've got to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen anyone do. So let's show you, and then you can see what I do. So the first stage is we need to cut a length of masking tape that's going to cover the whole blade. So I tend to go a little bit longer. And we're simply going to take the masking tape and completely cover our blade. Making sure that the whole surface is completely covered. There we go. So now at this stage you really need some reference material, so find yourself a picture on the internet of a laminated propeller that you like the look of, so that you can emulate that. And basically what we're going to do is try and achieve this sort of effect, and we're going to do it by basically drawing that onto the masking tape. So the advantage of drawing onto the masking tape rather than drawing straight onto here in some way, or painting it freehand, is that we can keep correcting it until it's right. We can get it right and be happy with it before we've actually done anything. And if you're not happy with it, we can erase it, or we can just take the masking tape off and you've lost nothing. So I'm going to keep this propeller here just to give me a rough guide, and you've got to decide how you want this to be. But the important bit is that you've got to think about how the layers of wood have been piled up. So if you stack the layers of wood up here in this middle section, and then as they travel across, the shape of that is going to dictate how the laminate falls. So here we'd have lots of thin layers, all equal, but then as it travels out amongst the propeller blade where it's been sanded into shape, you're stepping down and they're getting exaggerated as it's feathered out. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So it doesn't really matter which way round you do it, I guess, but I prefer to start at the root, and I like to use light as a bit of a guide. So I can see that this here is very light and then it's dark here, so that's giving me an idea of the shape of the propeller and the fall of the propeller, which helps to guide me. So my first layer, I guess, is a relatively small one. And for now, we can simply draw it on and not worry too much about where it's going. Then we can round off the end at the point that feels right. So I think this is going to be difficult to see on the camera. And then on the next layer down, we just follow that pattern but take it out a little further. So yeah, we're going to struggle to see that, aren't we? Let me get a black pen, I think that'll be easier. So that's our first one, and then we're going to follow that shape pen doesn't work on the masking tape so well. And then with a very sharp knife we can cut that out, and then basically you've created a masking set for that propeller blade then. So you decide where you want your light colour to be and where you want your dark colour to be. So it's effectively, I'm going to say that the top one is a light one, so that becomes a dark one, and that becomes a dark one. And that's how your blade will end up. So that's the way that we're going to tackle it. So I'm going to put some more tape on here, take this off camera, draw out my lines, and then we can cut them out and you can see that process. So that is my templates cut out. Now, if when you've done it, you're not happy with it, you've not lost anything, you can take them off and do it again. And then the process will be, when we've painted it, to flip it over and do that process again underneath, starting each one of your laminations where your paint ends so that it's all basically lined up. So that's all there is to it, you know. You draw them on, cut it off. So now we need to make that darker than the rest of it, and we're going to do that using the oil brusher technique that we've done before. But rather than spotting and dragging it across, because we want it to be darker, we'll paint it on and then wipe some off. So let's do that. I'm going to use dark mud for this. The colour actually isn't important. You use the colour that suits your needs, but in this instance it's going to give us a nice contrast to this and highlight what we've done particularly well. So like I say, what we're going to do is we're going to paint this on. Obviously we'll have done the other blade and you'd be having the whole thing masked up at the same time normally. There you go, so that's our blade painted. Let me just put that away. And then we're going to just gently thin that down. And what we're trying to achieve is a wood grain effect, but without making it too light. So we can see we've got some streaks in there now. So that should give us what we need. It's that simple. Then of course we can seal it. We can use crystal orange, crystal red, or we can just clear coat it, whatever we need. So what I'm going to do, if you airbrush this with crystal orange, that seals it in and it increases your drying time. So I'm going to let this dry for 15 minutes and then going to take the masks off just to show you how we've done the laminations, because it's the process that I'm trying to show you rather than anything else. This is a test piece. This won't be a propeller used on the build. We have yet to get to them. This was just proving a process before we get to the actual build. Okay, time to get the black onto these radiators. I'm going to use Tamiya's black panel line accent. It's a great product. I do wish Tamiya would bring out more colours in the range. They just have 3. We will be using all of them on this build at different points. This is a great colour for highlighting metallic aluminiums and what have you. What I don't like is the applicator. I think it's too thick for doing like pin washers and the like. And also the extendable arm, the panel line wash goes underneath, and if you tap on it, it'll suddenly leach out a lot of liquid, and it's a fast track to ruining your model. So what we're doing is we're decanting some. This is a blister pack for tablets. And the advantage of using this, other than ultimately it's disposable, is because it's smaller than my pallets. If you take, it means that the liquid collects at the bottom and dries out more slowly, because you've got less surface area exposed to the air. So it just extends the time I've got for applying the pin wash. So we're applying a pin wash to get the radiator effect on here. I'm using a 10x0 brush because ultimately we've got to get in between all of these little raised lines here and try and keep them silver. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. So we're going in with a small brush so that we can control that. So we load the brush up, a simple dip in, you can see that's loaded the bristles, and start away from your edges and move towards your edges is the way. So you can see I'm starting in the middle and moving up to the edges and effectively painting that wash in. Why am I doing it like that? Because I want to keep control and I want to build up the darkness gradually. There we go. So that's going to need more than one coat, but I want that to dry while we move on and do the next one and so on. Trying to be as neat as possible. Now you might be thinking, could I mask this off? My experience is when you mask for washers, the wash will generally leach underneath your masking and make a mess, so I don't tend to. But you can see we're already achieving the effect that we're looking for, making the radiator pop out and seeing all that detail that Wingnut Wings kindly moulded into that for us. Picked up a hair there, so I need to get rid of that. I always blow my parts before I start painting. I've got a camera lens puffer brush, but it doesn't always get everything. I've got a hair there and it's bothering me. There we go, got it. Don't know where all these hairs suddenly came from. Okay, so we can leave that for a few minutes to dry. Now, whilst we've got the panel line wash out, we can also use it to highlight some other details. So on the back of the radiator here, we've got some little recesses that we can pick out. We've got some bolt heads that we can also pick out and just highlight those. And pick out the edges of these plates here. Just gives the model a little bit of definition. It stands out as something that is a separate part, even if it's joined, welded on or whatever. So you can see that just brings that out a little bit, and the effect will lessen as it evaporates. And we can also do it around the filling cap and the base of the neck of the opening for filling the radiator with, well, I guess they filled it with water. There you go, adds a little bit of shadow to that. So I'll crack on with this and show you what that looks like when it's done. Comes to the exhausts, we've got plenty of painting to do, but while I've got my panel line wash out for the radiators, we can firstly go on the inside and just add some definition inside. There we go. We can add a little bit of definition to this detail at each end. Now what I want to also do is do some streaking. So if that's the back end, exhaust fumes coming out, there's air coming in there. So I want to just do a little bit of streaking, and I'm going to use this to do that. So we're just going to glance the brush over it, going in the direction of the air throw. There we go. It's very subtle, but gives you that feeling that this is being pushed through the air. So if you compare that, we're already starting to see some difference there, and it's bringing the part to life. Okay, next thing we want to do is to get some heat staining on the exhaust. You can see I've already done this one. And to do that, we're going to use these Tamiya weathering master sets. They're basically eyeshadow for modelers. So I'm using a makeup application brush. After a while, these things get quite dirty and dark. So the oil stain one I don't particularly want to use at this moment in time. So we're just going to use the blue and the orange. So that is burnt blue and burnt red. So the burnt blue basically reflects the metal that's got the first signs of heat, and then obviously as there is more heat goes through it over a longer period of time, that staining goes a bit orange. So what I'm trying to do is show a combination of the both. So we start with the blue, and we simply take a little bit onto our applicator, and starting from around about this ring here, the heat I see will come through the manifold and then travel down the pipe. So we want to have a little bit travel down, and then we apply a little bit more at that area around the ring, all the way around, and then more staining around the manifold there. And then we build that up a little bit towards the exit pipe where the gases will be building up, because as you get along the line, you've got more gases coming through the exhaust, or at least that's how I'm imagining it. And then we're just dragging it down the pipe, and that's just rubbing it in and staining the pipe a little bit, and that gives us that nice metallic burnt blue effect. So that's what I am looking for. I want to do that all the way around. When you're happy with that, and we've got a nice blush of burnt blue metal, then you can do your orange. And I'm just going to do the orange just on the tail end of the pipe there, because all those gases are getting funneled down and exhausted out the end. So that's where they're congregated. And what that does is it blends the two together and gives you that nice sort of burnt metal look. Do the end. Now you could leave it at that. You can see we've got this burnt effect there now. But these engines weren't very efficient. They were quite oily burners. So what I want to do is add a little bit of exhaust staining on the end. So that's not using the oil, that's using some black pastel chalk. So to do this, you can see I've got a black here and I've also got a dark grey. I'm going to do the dark grey first. We're just collecting some of that powder, rubbing it on the pastel, create some powder, tap it off on my bit of tissue there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that around the edges, flicking it onto the very end of the exhaust there. And it gradually builds up nice and slowly to get the effect that you want. So you can see that staining there is getting blacker towards the end, which is what I'm looking for. And then we can go in with the black and do the inside of the pipe there and the end of the pipe. And that gives us our used exhaust sort of look, and you just do as much as you like all weathering, less is more. There we go. I'm happy with that. That's all we're going to do. We're going to leave it at that. It almost looks like a rocket, doesn't it? We've just got the rust to do on the manifold going in, and then that is job done.